Hello you guys, it is Mia, and as you can see by the makeup, I am going to be talking about Wicked today. And I've titled this video kind of differently than I normally title my film related videos because I keep my work life and this film passion I have pretty separate as much as I can. However, in this particular case, because this is a movie musical, that I have a huge bias that I feel I really need to discuss before going into this video. So outside of my film hobbies and loves and endeavors, I am a professional performing artist for a living. I have sung at Lyric Opera Chicago. I have sung live streamed on Carnegie Hall across the world. I have done some Broadway auditions, and I make my living basically doing classical singing, musical theater singing, sometimes pop. I've done a little commercial work, voiceover stuff. And so the reason I bring this up is because my whole kind of training and childhood and everything I wanted to do as a very young kind of creative tot surrounds this genre. And Wicked was a book before it was a musical for 20 years before it became a movie. So my version of Wicked that sits so true in my heart and means everything to me is the stage version. And let's not kid ourselves, whether you just enjoy musicals or you are super passionate and critical about them, there've been a lot of really bad movie musicals throughout the last several years / decade. I think there's a lot that goes into the success of a movie musical, and maybe I'll break that down in another video. That would be another 10 minutes that we don't need to go into right now. But I do think there are elements that can make a movie musical either fantastic or a disaster. And Wicked is no exception to this and is not exempt from that. I saw it when I was 13 for the first time in London. Totally shaped me and transformed me in terms of not just like what I wanted to do as my job, but also just me as a woman of color, as a queer woman. The list goes on and on. It's a very powerful story. It's a very fitting story given kind of the climate of the world right now. So with that being said, let's dive in. I have very few critiques of this film. It blew my mind. And I think a lot of that is the success of the opening. I cannot stop thinking about No One Mourns the Wicked. And this is a spoiler-free review. There is a specific thing that happens in No One Mourns the Wicked that doesn't happen in the stage version that destroyed me. Like I walked in like, I'm not gonna cry. I'm sure this will be fine, but not great. Like very, 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 very guarded. And then the second that happened, I just... Hence why I didn't wear this makeup last night. I wore a gray sweatsuit and no makeup because I knew if it was bad, I would sob and be a disaster. And if it was great, I would sob and be a disaster. So it was a lose-lose either way. John Chu, every penny, because millions went into this budget, right? Millions. Every penny that went into this film was utilized. Most of it is not CGI. It may look CGI to people, but it's not if you go look at behind the scene photos. I mean, they planted like 9 million poppies. Don't quote me on that, but like the poppies were real. And the attention to detail, incorporating elements of not just the musical, but also the book and Wizard of Oz lore, if we want to call it that, was just flawless. I mean, it was like, because I've read the book, not for children. If you're a child watching this or a teen, or honestly, if you're under 18, please don't read the book. It is an adult's book and it's being advertised like it's for kids, and it is not a pro. Don't read it, okay? But I've read the book, and the book is really dark and very, very twisted and kind of low-key traumatizing. But the elements they incorporated from the book were perfect. The singing being live was absolutely incredible, and it adds a whole new dimension to the acting and the experience. One thing I will say, I saw it in standard Dolby sound. I have heard from people go in IMAX and the sound mixing is better. I will say from a musician perspective, the instrumentals versus the vocals, the instrumentals oftentimes were way louder than the vocals. I don't know why it was mixed that way, but it did kind of draw me out of the experience. So if you can, and if there is an IMAX near you, go to it in IMAX because the sound is much better. That's a very picky note from me, but as someone, again, who works in this field, how something's mixed in a soundtrack is really important to me. So that's just like a general kind of disclaimer. But the live singing was amazing. The set design, the costumes. I would say the biggest highlights for me were No One Mourns the Wicked, Dancing Through Life, which okay, hate's a strong word. I don't love how Dancing Through Life is in the musical. Like I'm always kind of like, okay. But in the movie, wonderful. Even songs I skip in the original Broadway soundtrack, like Sentimental Man or Something Bad Happening in Oz, I was absolutely spellbound in the theater because the visuals that pair really made it enticing and interesting. And that is the advantage of doing movie musicals. What you can't achieve on stage, you can achieve on screen. And can we argue that takes out some of the magic of it? Of course, because movies, the magic, no pun intended, is unlimited. Haha. And stage, it's much more limited. But the fact that they can pull it off on stage really makes it exciting and powerful. Whereas movies, it's kind of like, oh, well, we knew it. They could do that. But here I think it actually strikes a really good balance of like a lot of the choreography and the way it's filmed is very theatrical in nature, but with like this cinematic twist to it. Like it's so clear, especially in the choreography, that they honored like musical theater roots and some of the original choreography. But let's quickly talk about 3 very small things that weren't my favorite. And this first one's probably gonna make some people upset, but I have to say it. I really wasn't sold by Michelle Yeoh and Jeff Goldblum's casting as the Wizard and Madame Morrible. Now, they become much more sinister and evil in part 2. So I want to withhold that claim fully until we see part 2. Singing was fine. I know Michelle Yeoh said herself, I'm not a singer. I thought she did great because the Madame Morrible's speech is kind of like speech talky, singy anyway. It had nothing to do with their singing. And we know Jeff Goldblum can sing. They felt very mechanical to me, stiff to me. And I felt like Jeff Goldblum was kind of just playing himself, which like I didn't care that much because I just adore the crap out of that man. But Michelle Yeoh, just every line delivery was weird to me. Maybe it was the script. Again, it could be that they're putting on this front before they turn more evil in the second film. So I may fully take this claim back the second part 2 comes out. But it was odd to me. That was one of my biggest, like those two were 2 people in the cast I was looking forward to seeing the most. And I was most surprised in a not so positive way by their performance. But we'll see till part 2. Some of the sound mixing was really weird. And in addition to the sound mixing, the sound auto-tune. These are like legit singers. Cynthia has sung on Broadway. Ariana Grande is trained in musical theater. I think she's also sung on Broadway or is in a Broadway cast recording of something. Like there is no reason that those 2 should have been so heavily auto-tuned and manipulated by the sound engineers. That, especially as a professional musician, really bothered me because I know they don't need it. I'd rather hear live vocals like in Les Miserables from 2012, which I don't love that movie musical, but I appreciate that they kept the vocals pretty raw. I would rather hear something a little out of tune or a little like not fully there, but human, because that's what you hear live on Broadway too. Everyone's human, no one's perfect. I'd rather hear that than like all this perfected, mishmashed, auto-tuned stuff that really takes you out of the live singing. It's like, why did we do the live singing when that auto-tune and like extreme manipulation was present? And then the third thing, do I think this film is justified in 2 parts? Now that I've seen part 1, yes, I do think it's justified. I think trying to cram this whole story, if they're going to honor as much of the book as they claim they're going to, would not work in 1 film, or it would have had to be 3.5 hours, which no one's going to sit that long. I mean, but I am going to argue that it's too long. I think there's some scenes that dragged on way too long. Some scenes that could have been cut entirely that didn't add a lot, except maybe aesthetics. Do I still think it would need to be 2 parts? Yes, but maybe the runtime would be 2 hours and not 2.5. So again, it didn't bother me that much because I just love this story and this musical and this experience so much. But if you were like a first-time viewer or didn't know the whole lore of Wicked, I can see that feeling like, why are we dragging this on so long with these 2 at school, you know? I give Wicked 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is, in my mind, one of the best, we'll have to see part 2, but I'm optimistic. One of the best stage to film adaptations I've ever seen, and I've seen a ton. Some of my other favorites for reference include, I think Mamma Mia is really great, as much as I don't like Amanda Seyfried's singing, and Hairspray, the older one, not the newer one. I like the newer one, but the 2007 one is also incredible. But I think Wicked, given its budget and the amount of creative time that went into it, will go down in time as one of the best, if not possibly the best. I'm going to hold off on that claim though until part 2. Part 2 is a lot darker and a lot more emotional. And I hope they can pull it off because they've set the bar so high with this first one. I'm sure they will. I mean, we've already seen stills and footage of part 2 a little bit already, and it looks fantastic. those are my thoughts on Wicked. Please go see this. I mean, of course. I think it works so well on the big screen, but I would say the main reason to go see it is simply for the vocals. I mean, to hear the vocals, even if they're not mixed properly per se all the time, in a theater that large is transcendent. It really is, and just so touching. I will see you guys next time, and have a great rest of your week.